Hello, and welcome to the Rossaround Backstage podcast, talking with artists, technicians, musicians, producers, directors, and all the interesting and talented people that make it all happen for you. Hi, everybody. This is Ross Pallone with the Rossaround Backstage podcast. I'm here today in my studio in Thousand Oaks with drummer, percussionist, producer, songwriter, and singer Burleigh Drummond. Burleigh's one of the founding members of the 5-time Grammy Nominated group Ambrosia. They were formed in 1970 as a progressive rock band, and Burleigh's going to tell us all about his life story and how he survived all these years in the music business. So, Burleigh, tell us how you got started.
Oh, thanks, Ross. And now I should mention you forgot to say that I was a tap dancer too when I was young. See,
okay.
And that's pretty big stuff. So.
Okay, now we've got it.
Okay, so well, I was an Army brat. So both my parents, they were in the Army after World War II, and so I was born in '51, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas.
That's where the big prison is, right?
It is, and now there's some speculation. I never got confirmation on this that my parents met in Japan. And I guess they got a little, frisky on Mount Fuji, but they were both in the service. I think they got busted, but I think that's where I was made in Japan.
Oh,
but
right.
By the time my dad had got in a little trouble, came to Fort Leavenworth, and that's where I was born.
All right.
Yeah. So anyway, being an Army brat, we moved every couple of years, and I think about the time I was going in. Well, no, I was 7, 8 years old. We moved to Ankara, Turkey.
Oh. And
my father was involved with the missile bases over there. So I remember talking about music and how I got into it. My first startling memory, or the thing that registered deeply with me, I went to a bazaar with my mom, and I got separated from her somehow. And I wandered into the back of this tent. And in the tent, there was like these 6 guys spinning a huge copper plate. And they were all hammering the plate. And the synchronicity and the hammering of the plate, when we finally connected, I guess I had been missing. I think I was standing there for over 2 hours, just mesmerized, just caught in a trance. And so, I think that plays out much later in my life, that kind of burned into my psyche. But then, when we came back to the United States and I picked up, while we were in Turkey, I started playing bugle. And I started playing it on the military base, taps, reveille, things like that.
Did they actually
They let me play.
You for...
Yeah, they did.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
So that was my first musical outlet, so to say.
Your first gig.
My first gig.
Probably didn't get paid either.
No, I don't think I did. But, and then, accordion, stuff like that. And then in my neighborhood in Pomona, California.
That's where you moved to after Turkey?
Yeah, Claremont, then Pomona, because the housing was cheaper, Army. And so then my neighbor had a little toy drum set, and, after I destroyed that and my parents had to buy him another one, they decided to get me a set of drums. So that's how I started. I think I was in like the 5th grade, something like that.
Did you get a real set of drums?
I got a real set of drums. It was a cheap set, but a real set of drums.
Japanese, like a Japanese set?
Probably.
That was my first set.
Oh, yeah.
St. George.
Yeah, I think there was something like, I forget, they were like blue sparkle. And I remember, I don't know what my parents were expecting. So I had them in my room and I started playing and they just looked at each other and it was like the look of, like, oh my God, what have we done?
What have we done?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so but I think that all came from me, seeing that copper plate spinning and just having this desire to hammer and beat things and, seeing what happens. So
these guys that were beating on this thing, were they making something?
Yeah, they were hammering out the copper plate.
It wasn't anything musical, really. It was just.
But it was musical in the way they did it. Like they were spinning the plate and hammering. The synchronicity was amazing. So in the look on their faces, they were definitely like they were in the trance themselves. So.
Well, I think they have some pretty good drugs over there in
Turkey. Yeah, Turkey. Yeah. So and then of course the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, I saw that, and I had a neighborhood group. I played rhythm broom for a while because we didn't have guitars. I was John.
Oh,
So I that's how I got my rhythm broom playing together.
nice.
And then slowly first little bands, and watching the shows on TV that's when the English bands were coming. We're starting to see all those
Hollywood a Go-Go and
yeah.
Don Kirshner's rock concert.
Well, that was later, but this was like back in the late 50s, early 60s.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
Yeah, like Shindig.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. And, you saw all those bands, and I just ate it up, ate every bit of it up. Yeah.
Yeah,
so.
me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can relate to you very much so. Yeah.
Then moved out to L.A. To go to Loyola High School, all-boy Catholic high school. I think that's part of my problem for years. And it was a great school, but, and then all we had were the musicals that, we formed a little rock band that played the musicals. And one of my bandmates then was Billy Hinchy from Dino, Desi, and Billy.
Oh, wow.
And got to know them. And then started playing in little bands. And then finally graduated, went to UCLA, where I studied music. And then really started playing, in the jazz bands and all those kind of things, and there. And then one day I happened to be in Hollywood, and there was this little storefront, Musicians Contact Service.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I happened to have $5. I had I had my little card, 3x5 card. I put my name and my phone number. And about a month later, I got a call from Joe, Chris, and Dave from Ambrosia, because they saw my name and they thought, this is the guy.
Yeah, Drummond. Yeah.
And I had a van. So, I was in. I was in.
Yeah.
No, actually, we met in my living room, and we became a band immediately, just hanging out.
So the three of them, were they already a band?
Yeah, they're already a band. Ambergris Might, they called themselves, but it turns out another band had that name. So we had to pick another name, and then we became Ambrosia. And we jammed down in San Pedro in Joe's parents' house, and I think the first song was like an hour and a half long, and that, but we knew we were akin, and everybody in the band brought like a different element to the band, which is kind of made Ambrosia what it became, Joe had the not, I wouldn't call it country, but the Jackson Browne singer-songwriter thing, and Dave, one of the most talented people I've ever known, had, the Beach Boys and the Beatles and all that kind of pop sense to him. Chris had the blues, and
he was a blues guy.
He was a blues guy, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And I had kind of the jazz world African thing because I was studying ethnomusicology at UCLA, and I just lived in this downstairs room which had every instrument from all over the world, and played with a Ghanaian drum group for 4 years, and just I forgot that I had to go to English.
Right, yeah. But you learned all those weird instruments and how to play them, and
I learned a lot of ethnic instruments, a lot of Persian music, a lot of Indian music. Studied with Ala Raka, who was Ravi Shankar's tabla player. Studied with an African master drummer, Kwazi Badu, for years, and so I still use that stuff today. I mean, every time I do a session, there's probably I call on Africa to back me up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's great to know all that stuff.
Yeah. It's wonderful. So anyway, Ambrosia started. And
this was like 1970.
So this would be 1970, yes. And we would we'd play some pretty strange gigs. We were eclectic from the beginning. I mean, we were very influenced by the Prog, the Yes, King Crimson, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but still we had all those influences of the Beatles and the Beach Boys and all that stuff, plus all the jazz and all the blues, So you would go
Were
to...
you playing original
No,
music?
not at first. I mean, at first we would, like every other band, we would try to get gigs, and play. And so, but we always had originals from the very beginning. We had a mixed catalog of covers and originals. So we would play gigs like the Free Clinic, the San Pedro Free Clinic, where they put acid in the punch, and so we would do a couple kind of straight tunes, and then we do a piece where Luciano Berio, electronic music of a machine making love to a woman, and with a cello player playing, and us hammering nails into boards and sawing, and Dave would be conducting, and like. So
wow, you guys were out there.
Yeah, we were pretty out there. We're kind of like Zappa Beefheart, all kinds of elements up there. And then they were writing songs like Mama Frog and stuff like that. Pretty out stuff. And the only time it didn't really work was when we got a gig like where they wanted us to be the dance band. Mm-hmm. Like at a club, and like we had songs that we could do in that regard, but we would start playing, and we kind of thought we were Tony Williams' Lifetime, and all of a sudden it would just get a little out and farther out and further out, and then we'd be fired.
You guys just wanted to play what you wanted to play, right?
Yeah, and we couldn't help it. I think we could. I mean that. All due respect to those forms of music, I mean, they're more than worthy. And we definitely, jumping ahead years, we were doing our first two, when we finally got signed, we were doing our first two records at Mama Joe's in North Hollywood, where we recorded. And we had no money, so we would record all day, and then we'd go play a female gay bar at night, right down the street, 2 blocks from the studio. And so it'd be like 5 sets of R&B with this girl named Leah, who had huge breasts, and the women, they would come to see her. But we were the R&B backup band, and we really, really like nailed it. We got into it, and learned all that stuff. And what's funny is it manifested itself in our music later on, because when we were this progressive band when we started, but then by the third album we're doing, like How Much I Feel and Dancing by Myself, and and out of those experiences of playing the R&B, Biggest Part of Me and things like that started manifesting themselves from all this music we had played to survive, while we were doing our prog records.
It's just like when you're making a salad or something, you're putting all these ingredients into your brains.
Yeah.
And then you don't know when or if this is ever going to help you, but inevitably, at some point,
it comes back.
You draw
out.
from that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just probably like same thing with your African percussionist stuff.
Oh yeah,
it's probably things that are in your brain that make you think a certain way.
Right. It makes you hear it a certain way.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So back to
okay,
those days.
So back, so we were, like limping along. We moved in our first band house in Hermosa Beach, and then at night we would, go down to the Lighthouse, which used to be the jazz club. Back then it was a hardcore jazz club.
I remember the Lighthouse. Yeah,
in Hermosa Beach, and they had a little. What do you call it? The doors that were cut in half, where the top half would open. And so they got to know us pretty good, and so we'd be there, hanging over that half door that was shut. Because we didn't have the money to get in, and we saw everybody, every major jazz artist that was playing at the time, we saw, And then by the end of toward the end, middle of the second set, they'd let us come in, and sit. And, I sat like 2 feet away from Elvin Jones, Art Blakey, you name them, all the greatest drummers in the world. I was like sat right by their hi-hat looking up at them. And, oh man, it's just like, it was the education of a lifetime.
I'll bet, yeah.
Just to see those guys play. And so, anyway, just another influence that kind of, hit us over the head. Chick Corea, all those people when they were young and starting out, you know. And then things, you know, ambled on, and then we this sound company was auditioning their sound system at the Hollywood Bowl, and we were good friends with them, Jim Gamble, people like that. And so they asked us, hey, will you come play at the Hollywood Bowl to demonstrate our sound system, you know? So we go to do that, and this guy in the audience, a guy that was testing the music, the speaker, the quality of sound, was a guy named Gordon Perry, and he was the chief recording engineer for London Decca Classical. So he was watching us, listening to the sound system, and he said he stopped caring about the sound system and started tuning into us, and he became our champion, and he took us to everything. We went to every concert at the Hollywood Bowl for like a year and a half to see met every major conductor, you know, I mean, the biggies, you know, Schulte, all these guys. Yeah, we became friends with Zubin Mehta. He'd come to our shows, and you know, and things like that. So we all of a sudden we're getting this huge influence of classical music into us, you know. And who were we? We're just like a neighborhood, you know, band hanging out with all the biggest people in the classical world, you know.
Wow.
And so that crept into our music. And so finally one thing led to another, and we got an audition for Herb Alpert at A&M Studios. So we go down to A&M, we got our little tiny equipment on this huge sound stage. And, you know, at the very end of the hall, like it felt like it was like 300 yards away, we see this figure come in, and it's Herb Alpert. And we were so nervous. I don't even think I could control my bass drum pedal. You know, it's like I tried to hit it, and it would go like a half beat late. You know, it's like our nerves were just like, you know. So he was gracious enough. He let us record 3 songs for him for A&M, and so we did. One of them was Holding On to Yesterday, which became our first hit later, but it was a country style. And then a couple other, Lovely Lady, and a couple of songs. But we sounded like a country band then. And so he passed on it. But a friend of ours was building a studio in the North Hollywood called Mama Joe's, owned by Freddie Pirro. And he was playing the tapes in the studio as he was working on the studio. And Freddie Pirro heard him and says, "Who's that?" And eventually took us to Russ Regan, and we got signed to 20th Century Fox off of the same demos that Herb Alpert passed on.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So Herb gave you that stuff, and you were able to use it.
Yeah. He just, I mean, he let us just have copies of it. You know, and so thank you, Herb Alpert.
Yeah.
You know, without him, we probably wouldn't know, who knows what had happened.
Right. So the result was the same. You still got a record contract.
Yeah. Right. So, yeah, and it was funny because right during that period, I think we were just finishing college, and Dave had gotten involved in the Mass because another friend of ours that we had met through Gordon was Leonard Bernstein. So we're hanging out with Leonard Bernstein a lot, and we auditioned to play his Mass, and Dave was the only one that got in, but Ruth Underwood and Ian Underwood from Zappa, we met. And Ruth invited me down to play for Frank Zappa because Frank Zappa was looking for a drummer. So I went in and played, and he had me keep coming back for about a month and a half, maybe a month and a half, 2 months. And, you know, I just came back every day. In fact, I forgot that I even had anything else going on. Like I didn't even show up for finals at college because, you know, I was probably sleeping 2 hours, and every other second I was poring over this music, trying to just get by, just to hang on, you know. And the band was George Duke, the Fowler brothers, Jean-Luc Ponty. It's ridiculous. And then Ambrosia got this offer, and I go to Frank and I go, "Hey, my band's got an offer," and he said, "What's your band, right?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you got to go do that, you know." And then I heard another story about him and Lowell George, Lowell George used to be in his band, and Lowell George one day goes to Frank, "Hey, Frank, can I play you a song I wrote?" And he played them "I'm Willing," and Frank goes, "That's great, Lowell. You're fired. Go start your own band."
Well, Frank didn't want to hold anybody back.
No, he was great, but he was like my whole experience with him, whether I would have ended up being the drummer, which I never thought that I was in that league, but he was very fatherly, very.
Well, you must have been in the league, or you wouldn't have been asked back.
Or maybe he just didn't have anybody else to have.
That seems not right. Yeah,
but it was, man, I've never sweat so much in my life.
No, not easy stuff either,
man.
right? Really difficult.
It was crazy.
Music.
So Ambrosia got its first deal,
and that was in 1974.
Yeah, 74. We started recording, and Russ Regan, to his credit, we recorded 40 songs because we demoed up 40 songs. I mean, but they were the quality of records. There was like everything from country to progressive to rock to, our whole. We played out all our influences, all the things that we ever were inspired by, the writing was prolific. Dave and Joe and I wrote a few things, but so he came in, and to hear all, and he sat through all 40 of them, and at the end he goes, he goes, "This is all good stuff." He goes, "I want you to." He picked 3 songs. He said, "Nice, Nice, Very Nice," and "Mama Frog," and "Holding On Yesterday." He said, I don't have this. He goes, "I don't have an act that can do this. Can you give me an album of this?" And so, so we flushed it out, the whole album, Time Waits and, Make Us All Aware and all those. So in that prog kind of avenue, and that became our first record, which is considered by some, well, I'll get to that later when Alan comes into the picture.
Right.
Yeah. So we created that album, and then.
And who was the producer?
Well, Freddie Pirro was the producer in title, but it was really the band and Freddie. I mean, I won't discredit Freddie, but the band did. The band gave, everybody in that band gave everything they had. And
who was the engineer? Do you remember?
Chuck Johnson.
Okay.
He
did the whole thing.
Chuck Johnson and Billy Taylor were the 2 kind of house engineers at Mama Joe's. And coming to find out, Chuck Johnson just revealed to us that the whole time during that recording, he had no high end from an accident he had before that. He didn't know what he was hearing.
Oh, he was just guessing.
He was guessing, yeah. And then, but he got so much credit for what he got on tape. It was amazing. Mm-hmm. And then it came time to mix, and our friend Gordon Perry, the classical engineer, said, "You've got to hear this album." And and it was Dark Side of the Moon, and we had never heard it. And we heard it, and we just go, "Oh my God." And he goes, "You've got to get this man to mix your record." So we looked on the record, Abbey Road. Okay, we'll call Abbey Road. And we called Abbey Road, and they go, "Hi, is Alan Parsons available?" And he goes, "Speaking,"
Great.
So he was coming over for the Grammys to Dark Side of the Moon, and he came by and heard us, and he agreed to mix it, and so he did, and
he mixed it there at Mama Joe's.
He mixed it there at Mama Joe's,
okay.
And it went on to be. It's considered that became nominated for 2 Grammys for best recording, and it's considered by some audiophile societies to be the best piece of recorded music on vinyl.
Nice.
To this day.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. So, and then Alan produced our second album, with the band, Somewhere I Never Traveled. And during that period, Alan got signed to the same label that we were signed on, 20th Century Fox, through Russ Regan.
So Alan didn't have the Alan Parsons Project at that time.
Not when he mixed us. In fact, when he was mixing us, he asked us one day to record a song for him, and it ended up being The Raven.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and but when he did it, he was so secretive. He and I forget his partner's name.
Eric Wolfson.
Eric Wolfson, yeah. They said, it's called The Raver, and so because they were so paranoid about the idea, the Edgar Allan Poe thing getting out.
Yeah, because that was the whole basis for the album.
Right,
yeah.
Right. That they didn't want that to get out. So we did the track, and it ended up being on the record, and, it was cool. But that was the beginning of the Alan Parsons Project. We were the first band to record on it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there we go. And so the second album, and then the third album, a lot of touring, like 6 months in a Winnebago. Boy, it smelled bad in there.
You guys weren't like flying high and out on big tours with lots of trucks and buses and.
No, not at that time. I mean, we had the only hit we had at the time was "Holding On to Yesterday," and even though in some, we went to I think Denver, a radio station in Denver, and we actually beat out One of These Nights by the Eagles. But we were in the the top 5, top 10 in different markets, but one single wasn't enough to catapult you to headline or arena status. So we would headline smaller places, clubs, but we were typically at that point supporting other acts, bigger acts.
Oh, okay.
So that's what we did. And, everybody, gosh, I think we opened, we supported everybody, like you name it. Heart, Fleetwood Mac, the Doobie Brothers, it's on and on and on. Well, I mean, we had our special moments where, like, say in Buffalo, we were, for some reason they thought we were the greatest thing, and we headlined, So we had some headline shows, but we did a lot of support stuff too. Beach Boys, things like that. In fact, one of our first gigs was the Iowa State Fair, 50,000 people, and Gerald Ford was our opening act.
Oh, wow.
He gave a speech, then we played, and then the Beach Boys played.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're talking about maybe the period of the first 3 albums then?
Yeah, that was the first 2 albums. So 75.
The first 2 albums.
75 was our first one. I think 76, maybe 77 was our second. And then we get into the third album, Life Beyond L.A., and then we had been very, I want to say prog, but Ambrosia's not prog. It's not notes for note's sake. It's kind of like melodic prog. There's always a song. There's always a melody, and the music was always contoured to fit the song. It wasn't like just how fast can I play, or even though we got a little out, I always thought it was like melodic prog. For lack of a better word.
Okay.
And then, then we get to Life Beyond L.A., and Dave had written this song, How Much I Feel. Well, okay, it was like, what do we do now? This song, it's obviously a hit, but
you guys knew.
We knew it was,
when you were recording it, that it was potentially
a hit record.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
But we knew it was so much different than our other stuff that it might betray us in a way. And
you were afraid of losing fans?
Well, and we did. It took us out of the arena, which was mostly a young male, there to see the hero. It's like hero worship thing, to the nightclub with young women,
Right.
Yeah, because How Much I Feel wasn't the studliest of songs, it was... all due credit to the song, it's fine, but it was so enough on the road. At that time there was AM and FM.
Yeah.
So FM was, we were big babies of FM. They embraced us because our stuff was, proggish, and
yes.
So off that same album, they loved Life Beyond L.A. They wouldn't play How Much I Feel, and AM would play How Much I Feel. So we go to the prog stations to do interviews, and they were pissed off. They were like, "You sold out. You did. How could you do that? How could, we're going, And we were kind of like, we rationalized it by saying, "Hey, the Beatles. The Beatles could do a love song. they could do Rain, they could do, Strawberry Fields, and they could do the simplest of songs too. Nobody told them you can't do that.
Yeah. Right.
And it was kind of like, why can't we?
Well, I think that people of our generation, because we're the same age, we remember the difference between AM and FM.
Right.
Young people now, or even in the last 30 years, don't even know what that difference was.
Right.
AM, they played nothing but top 10, top 40 stuff, rotation all the time.
Right.
And that's all they played. And on the FM stations, I remember we had a station, KPPC, from Pasadena, I believe.
Right.
And they would never play anything that was played on AM.
Right.
And that was your audience. They would play Hendrix and Led Zeppelin and all B-sides, all deep cuts and stuff. Never play the hits.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a different time.
It was. Yeah. I mean, now I know. I don't even know how to describe these times. I mean, it's.
Well, there's differences, but all the music
serious.
was basic. I mean, AM now is basically talk radio, and FM is music. Yeah, and there's all kinds of different.
Then you got all the serious
formats.
All those
plus the cable.
So anyway, the hit got us a whole new audience. How Much I Feel, and then of course to the album after that, we had 2 hits: Biggest Part of Me and You're the Only Woman. So now we were kind of a hit band and playing those kind of venues. But, it wasn't like arena type stuff because, and performing arts centers weren't really, considered rock and roll at that time. That was more like play production and things like that.
Yeah.
So, you played larger clubs and we would play big places. We wouldn't be playing with Rush anymore like we did in the early. You know what I'm saying?
Now you're probably maybe playing with some R&B artists or something.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. In fact, I remember one show down in the South. We were paired up with the Average White Band. And we came out and opened, and it was like the whole audience was black. And we kick into Nice. Very nice. And they're just looking at us like, who are you?
What are you guys doing here?
And then finally we do one of the hits and they go, oh, okay. But man, for like half the set.
But you only had like 3 or 4 songs like that. The rest of them were all progressive rock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, the gap between those songs, between the hits and the prog, used to seem so extreme. But now when we play it, it doesn't feel that extreme. It feels like it all works together.
Yeah.
So time heals all.
Yeah. So, but in the end, it was successful to have those hits, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
For the band. And I mean, record sales were good.
Right.
And maybe you weren't doing what you wanted live in the live situations as much, but you can't beat record sales.
I mean, we've never disrespected anything that we recorded. I mean, and everything we do is still a challenge and a work in progress to perform. I hear about artists, that are bored to death with their catalog. I can honestly say I'm not bored with Ambrosia when I play. Mm-hmm. It's still, I still have to practice it. I still have to be there. You can't phone it in. It's like, I think that alone says that music is worthy,
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, so for the audience, I've been doing a few shows with you guys recently over the last few months.
Was that you back there?
Yeah, that was me. And graciously, you called me up and asked me if I was available, and we did we've done some shows, doing some more, and it is. I can speak firsthand that it's a great show. The core band is still there, and then you have some new members, and it's great. It's all fantastic musicians, great singing, and the great Ambrosia songs. It's wonderful. Buddy. I encourage everybody to go out and see Ambrosia when you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Life Beyond LA, That one had 2 hits on it.
No, that had one.
Oh,
that had How Much
one.
I Feel.
So then 180 would have been...
But Life Beyond LA, that album had How Much I Feel, but it also still had a prog hit. Life Beyond LA, the song, actually was kind of a prog hit. So that's when we had hits in both AM and FM markets.
Oh, nice.
Which was nice, but the AM market was really starting to come on, with the hits. And so then when we had Biggest Part of Me and You're the Only Woman, and then you start doing all the TV shows, and doing those songs, that kind of is the stamp of identity then,
right.
to the masses. So, but then an interesting thing happened. So after we do big 180, which had Biggest Part of Me and You're the Only Woman, we're out to dinner one night with some of the people from Warner Brothers, who we were now on Warner Brothers. Bob Reger, he was talking to us, and he goes, "What are you guys doing?" And we go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "I brought you to this label because I wanted you guys to be the prog band that you were, on 20th Century Fox." And we're going, "What?" And he goes, "That's what I wanted, And okay, so this lit a fire under the band. Let's be young lions one more time, and go be the prog band. And so we do this. We write this album called Rhode Island, and we enlist James Guthrie, who did the Wall for Pink Floyd. Mm-hmm. He becomes our engineer on this one. We really rock it up. I mean, that album is very electrically charged, and it's got some really cool stuff and some prog moments, and we hand it in. But in the meantime, Bob Reger passes away. So we hand it in to the label, and they go, "What's this? Where's Biggest Part of Me? Where's?" And we go, "Well,
That is such a common story.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
acts. They get signed by somebody.
Yeah,
and they go in and they do the record, and by the time they finish the record, the guy that hired them is either dead or is fired. And then they hand it in. They're going, "Well, this isn't what we wanted." Oh man!
So that album, that album didn't do big guns. And at that time, there was a lot of unrest in the band with our management, and we weren't making much money as individuals in this band. That even after the apparent success, so it was time to take a break. And
so they did take the album as you finished it, and they did release it.
They did release it, and in retrospect, when I hear it, there's a couple songs that could have been great hits, but the time, it was just a time, I guess. The time
you have a window.
Yeah,
when you release an album, you have a window.
Yeah.
Of maybe 6 months or something. And
if it doesn't
something doesn't hit, then the album is dead.
Right. So anyway, we took a break, and Dave went on and tried to he did a solo album, and then and it was the best thing that could have happened to me at that time, to take the break, because I was, I don't know, the word was unhappy, but being in a band, it sounds like, oh, it's got to be the best thing in the world, but it was not great. It was a very lonely place, because you don't really have a life. You're in a studio all day, or you're touring and you're playing, and then you're not, and you're alone. And so the break was great, because I met my wife.
It's Mary Harris.
Mary Harris, who's in Ambrosia now.
Right.
And kicks my ass every day on stage.
She's very good. Yes.
And we had, a couple children, and my life, that's when I feel like my life really started. And so, and we formed a band, Tin Drum. Well, she was touring with Jimmy Buffett, and I was touring with Jim Messina, and a lot of people. And we had our first child, our son, and we would literally sometimes pass them off to each other in an airport. Like, she'd be coming in, I'd be going out. Here's the son. It's great to see you in a couple weeks. And so we lived like that for like a year and a half, and and we just came to the conclusion that couldn't do it. She couldn't stand to be away from her son. I mean, and she so she quit Jimmy Buffett, and we started our own band called 10 Drum, and we did 3 albums, and then Mary the band started reformed because I think in a nutshell what happened, everybody kind of put Joe and Dave and everybody kind of put their feelers out there and weren't really happy with where their careers were going, so they kind of came back and said, let's try Ambrosia again, and so we did, and it was slow at first, and I had some different members like Shem Shrek was our percussion player, background singer. Now he's bass player for Toto. Talik Olestad, great harmonica player, keyboard player, plays lives in Holland now, plays all through Europe. He's a great artist over there.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah. So we had a lot of great musicians come in and help us. And then Mary started subbing in the band, my wife. And like whenever Dave couldn't make it, or another one of our tenor singers couldn't make it, Mary would just sing the tenor parts, and she'd be Dave Pack. And actually that went over really, really well. You would think, but here was this girl up there nailing it. And so the band had, fits and starts of finding the right chemistry. And then for the last 10 years, it's been very stable. And now it's doing very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and the lineup, you can tell everybody who the lineup is.
Sure. So, I'm playing drums, and Joe Puerta is the original bass player and singer and one of the main writers. Christopher North plays keyboards, mostly organ and synth. Mary Harris Drummond, my wife, is a keyboard player, more of the rhythmic keyboard player, playing keys, piano, and synth, and singing. Mm-hmm. And then we have Doug Jackson, who's been with the band for about 17 years now, playing guitar and sings. And then you have Ken Stacey, who's kind of been our tenor singer and plays acoustic, and very talented singer. So
yeah, they all are.
Yeah. So the band, I feel, is pretty solid now.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really good. Ken and Joe sing most of the leads.
Yeah, they're the main lead singers. Mary sings a couple.
They're both phenomenal singers. They're just great.
And what's happened too is kind of a strange byproduct of playing with a lot of people from our generation on different shows. We've started this thing called Ambrosia and Friends, which we just did a big show in St. Charles, Missouri, where we play. Ambrosia gets up and we play a couple tunes, and then we'll bring out, say, John Ford Coley or Robbie Dupree. And then we back them up, and they play with us, and then we do a couple songs. Then we bring out Stephen Bishop. Stephen Bishop will come out, and
yeah, that's cool.
And we just did one with John Ford Coley, Stephen Bishop, and Bill and Tamara Champlin, and it's a lot of fun because it's just a bunch of friends really getting up there and sharing their history.
Yeah,
and we get to all be involved with each other, and it's great. So.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Now, so after Rhode Island,
yeah,
never did another actual Ambrosia studio album.
No. Well, we did do a compilation record when we first got back together, and we had a couple of new songs on it. But the majority of it was the greatest hits. It was basically the greatest hits with a couple new songs, and we added a hit called "I Just Can't Let Go." That was a hit in the Philippines. Mm-hmm. That had Dave singing with Michael McDonald and Yamo Be There. Who sang on it?
James Ingram.
James Ingram and Michael McDonald are on that record with us.
Oh, couldn't get anybody good, huh?
No, it was a struggle. In fact, we just did a show with Michael McDonald where we were.
You were his backup.
Yeah, we were
band that was on a cruise.
Yeah,
right?
we were honored enough to be his band. So
nice.
Yeah, so that's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. And another wonderful person. Yeah,
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, so doesn't get better than that.
So that's kind of where Ambrosia is now, and
but you, I kind of eavesdrop on you guys when you're talking, and it sounds like you guys are looking towards maybe making a new Ambrosia record.
Well,
right?
we wrote an album's worth of material almost 2 years ago, and we've worked up a couple tunes to the point where we've demoed them and put them out. But we need. I guess what's hard now is like when you tour and you're. I wouldn't call it touring or weekend warrioring or whatever it is.
Yeah, you're not really out for very long. You're usually going out for a couple of shows.
Yeah, and you're actually flying more than you're playing. And,
yeah.
So what's hard is, you get home on a Monday and you're leaving on a Thursday. It's hard to get the band together to record. It's no excuse, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's hard because everybody. It's not like we all live in the same house anymore.
And you don't even live in the same area. You all live in Southern California, but very far away from each other.
Yeah, so the recording that we've done, I typically just start it in my studio, where I'll lay down a drum track and Murray will lay down the keys, and then I'll bring in people one by one and finish the tune. But I miss those days, like when our early records where we, no clicks, nothing.
Just played as a band.
We just had to play until you got something that sounded right.
Yeah. But you can still do that. It just costs money.
No, actually, that's even in my home.
But you have a facility at your place to record the whole band at the same time, right?
Yes. And, I love the energy of having to play together as a band to make it right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's just, that to me is like making music with somebody as opposed to just doing your part.
Yeah.
And, because when you layer, and 99% of records are made this way now. You can't. The person that you're recording to, the drum track, say the drums and the drum bass player, keyboard player that's already on the tape. They can't respond to you.
No.
You've got to fit into what they're doing. And so it stops being a little bit of a language.
Yeah.
A conversation. It's kind of it's a different thing.
It is a different thing. Yeah. It sure is. Yeah. Well, I hope that you guys do
I
that,
hope
though.
we do too.
I think that the Ambrosia fans that are out there are hungry for another Ambrosia record.
It's crazy too because the material that we wrote was like a true synthesis of like prog and pop coming together because all those elements are still there, but it really kind of came out. It comes like say you've probably heard that song Satellite.
Mm-hmm.
It has some prog elements to it, but it's a song. And of course bands like Steely Dan and all that have helped make. Great music accessible. It doesn't have to be dumbed down to be a hit anymore.
Right. They're right on that line, though, where it's incredible musicianship, but at the same time, it's really more about the song.
Right.
And the melody and, all the things that go into making a great commercial hit.
Right.
Or not commercial hit, but a really good song.
Yeah. No. The song is the core.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So that kind of brings us up to today, doesn't it? Yeah, that's kind of what it is. Okay, so tell me a little bit about when you were younger, who was your influence as far as drummers? Who really blew your mind when you saw drummers?
Well, I have to say I'm a fan of almost every drummer I've ever seen, but I had a period where. My revelation came. My dad was head of the procurement office in Pasadena when he was in the Army, and so I lived in Pomona with my mom. And when my dad wanted to see me, he'd have his driver, which was not sanctioned by the Army. He'd have his driver Jack come all the way out to Pomona to pick me up in this car, and the whole way back and forth. He had on this jazz station and he would just tell me who was who, and that was my education.
Mm-hmm.
And so Elvin Jones from the John Coltrane Quartet is probably the drummer that just wiped me out. I just couldn't believe somebody could play like that.
Wow. What about on the rock side?
On the rock side, I mean, I was a Ginger Baker fan. But I was a Ringo fan. I mean, Ringo to me is as good a song drummer as anybody's ever been. You could you could strip all the music away from all those songs and just hear the drum track, and you'll know what song it is. Mm-hmm. Just because he was so signature in what he did. But Mitch Mitchell, all those guys, everybody.
Some great musicians back in those days.
Oh man, Dave Clark.
And they were so free,
to
do whatever they wanted. Like Mitch Mitchell, you talk about him, it's like, well, his drum kit was tuned like a jazz kit.
It was, he was,
but it worked in the rock.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when you listen to those old records. You go, wow, that's a jazz kit. You know.
But he played the shit out of it, though.
Oh, he sure did. I've heard that it was like almost futile for him because the guitar was so
loud. Yeah, sure.
Nobody could hear him anyway.
That's a funny experience for me. I started studying with the legendary Freddie Gruber, and the notorious Freddie Gruber, who was just an amazing teacher, drum teacher. But I would there was a period I'd come to my lessons and here in the Valley, in San Fernando Valley, and Mitch Mitchell and Jim Keltner. Jim Keltner was friends with Mitch Mitchell, and Jim Keltner studied with Freddie Gruber too. And they'd sit there to watch me take my lesson. So I'd have to take my lesson in front of Mitch Mitchell and Jim Keltner.
Oh, wow.
As they, and it's just like...
No pressure. Wow.
Yeah.
No.
So
well, you surrounded yourself with great people.
I was, well, I walked, I didn't ask for that. It just happened,
But you should be up there in that.
Oh, you do me.
Yeah, well, you're a great drummer.
I appreciate that. Thanks, but I feel like I've studied with a lot of amazing people and observed a lot, and and definitely am inspired. But I feel like the door is slightly ajar, and I've got my foot stuck in the door, so it can't close all the way. And there's a bright light in the door. And I just can't wait to get inside the room of knowledge, of drumming, and and be in the room all the way. I feel like I get a little bit of myself in there. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense, but...
Well, I think you're taking a little bit off of your talent.
Oh, well...
I think you're a little humble.
Oh, thanks, but... I think I'm more desirous than talented.
Well, you are a handsome man.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, and all the women are after you at those gigs. Good thing you have Mary there to defend them off.
She can't get past her.
How does that work? Does it work out all right? Of course, Mary, you'll probably hear this. You got to be careful what you say. But how does it work out with having a wife in the band?
Well, I mean, because it's Mary. I've never met another woman like her that, I can be at peace with. I mean, there's the 1% of the time where, everybody bickers or has stupid quarrels, but we usually realize they're stupid. They don't usually go on too long, and she's my partner.
Well, and she's your peer too, because she's a pro musician. She's she's. It's not like she's in the band just because she's a girl or because she's your wife. She's in the band because she's got the talent that you guys need.
It's funny because we're both playing with Bill Champlin now, so we're both in Bill Chaplin's band. And I think the only reason that I'm in the band is because Bill likes Mary so much.
I don't think so. But, you guys are playing with Bill Champlin, and you're playing with some other artists too, right?
Yeah, I play with Player, with Peter Beckett, and that's fun. It's you have the image of Player as like Baby Come Back, which is a little Ambrosia-esque.
It is very much, yeah.
But they rock. It's more of a rock band than, say, Ambrosia, which is great for me because I don't get that side that much,
Yeah.
I mean, people think being in a band is must be amazing, but you do have to realize that for the majority of the year, you're going to play 16 songs. That's going to be your year.
Yeah.
So for me, it's great. I love doing session work. I love playing. I play at local churches, and I play wherever I can. I just love to play.
Well, the last time we did a gig, and you and Mary are in the car, and I'm riding with you guys, and you were talking about your next week, and it was like unbelievable. You were both you and Mary were going. You were getting home, and then you had to go. Well, you had to go to a birthday party or something, but then right after that, the whole next week, you were playing with like 3 different bands during the week, and then doing a recording session, and it's like you guys are busy.
Well, yeah. I mean,
which is good.
It is good. I mean, and
Mary says you never turn anything down.
Well, why?
Yeah.
I mean, I know Mary sometimes would chide me, like when I'd be off to do the $50 jazz gig in a little dumpy jazz bar. It's like, those are the best. Uh-huh. Those are the best gigs.
Yeah, they're fun.
Yeah. I mean, that's where you really play. You really get to stretch and test, push yourself, test yourself.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what I love. I've always been attracted to this philosophy that I think it comes from the Middle East. I heard about like Persia. The whole point of what they would expect from the performer was the performer had to kind of travel. The performer had to leave the consciousness that he was in, his normal consciousness, and travel somewhere so that the audience could go with him. Oh. Like if he, and they would tend to give him, mind-enhancing things to take him there, but it makes sense. Like say, if you're performing and there's an audience there to see you, if you don't go somewhere with your emotional capability or your talent to play and to explore, then if you don't go there, they're stuck at the station. They're just stuck. I mean, if there's no emotion coming off of you, they can't buy into it.
Right.
And so you gotta put it out so they can go with you. It's your job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I sure hope that Ambrosia does proceed.
I hope it
with
does
the
too.
record.
Yeah.
And I think it'll be great. I think it'll be well received. I think that you have a lot of fans out there that would love to hear that. You're a working musician. Hasn't been an easy life, though, has it? Being a musician, has it?
No, it hasn't. But I guess in retrospect, I'm glad that I didn't give it up or cash in. You know? I mean, because now, I have a living. I can make a living doing it, and even though I probably could have made more money doing something else, I can't guarantee that I would be happier.
You probably wouldn't have been.
I probably wouldn't. So.
Yeah. I think it's a blessing when people strive to be a musician and they actually make it. Now, your definition of making it doesn't necessarily mean huge riches.
No, absolutely.
Monetarily.
Right.
But
right.
I think I'm not a professional musician, but I'm in the business just like you are.
Oh, you are, yeah.
And I look at my life and I think, oh man, I could have gotten a job at with the city or something, and I'd have a retirement, and all these things that you get with those kinds of jobs. But when I look back on my life and all the people that I've gotten to work with and get to know and the places I've been and everything, I can't imagine. I wouldn't trade it for any financial security or anything. But with that said, it's not for everybody.
No,
not everybody can handle this kind of pressure and instability in their life.
Right.
And
those people tend to drop out.
Yeah.
And you can't blame them. I mean,
no,
they were looking for something else, and it's just like it takes. What's the saying? It takes a certain woman to love a drummer. But I mean, it takes a certain constitution to hang in to this. Yeah, you've got to really, really want to do it.
Oh yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, Burleigh Drummond, my neighbor, and now my sometimes boss. Appreciate you coming out and doing this.
You're the boss. You're the one that tells me I have to play softer.
Well, depends on the venue. That last one was a little strange. Yeah. So, but I appreciate you being a part of this. Thanks for coming over.
Thank you for having me. It's been an honor and a treat. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right, Burleigh Drummond of Ambrosia. We'll say goodbye. We'll keep our ear out for that new record.
Okay, great. I promise.
Bye-bye, everybody.
The Rossaround Backstage podcast wants to thank my good friend Tim Heinz for the original music that you are listening to now. We are currently looking for sponsors for the Rossaround Backstage podcast so that we can continue to bring you interesting stories like the one you just heard. I can be reached through Facebook or email me at rosspallone.com. Thank you for listening.